Hello, 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 and welcome to Mike Cobb's Offshore Investment Report. Grab your coffee because we're going to have a good podcast today. I have one question for Mike. One thought-provoking question. I think that is kind of incisive and which I have not briefed him on beforehand, so it's going to come as a total surprise. Let's see what happens. Mike, welcome.
Hey, Carter. Hey, good morning. Yeah, it is a good morning. By the way, the answer to your question is green. Okay?
You
Green.
knew. All right, folks, thanks for joining us. This has been a real pleasure. Green is
green. I don't know. I don't know what the question is, but green is a great answer. So,
green is green as in cash. Actually, it is part of the answer.
All
because
right.
here's the question. All right. Here's the question, which I love when an interviewer asks a guest this, or in this case, the host of the show, Mike Cobb. Mike, if you could talk to the 18-year-old Mike Cobb today, okay, what advice would you give him about offshore investing? Now, that's probably, 30 years ago, right? Around 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
That'd be 40 years ago. I'm 57, Carter. So 40 years ago.
Honest to God, I thought you were about 50, maybe 50. You look great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. Man, I'll tell you, I feel like I look like I'm waiting for the embalming fluid. All right, here we go.
Hey, let me give you two answers. Let me back you up 1 year to 17. Okay. It's funny. I've lived my life with almost no regrets, truly almost no regrets.
Incredible.
And I remember, I'm a tangent here for a second, but I remember it's about 10 years ago now. I was actually misdiagnosed with lung cancer, and they thought that, all the doctors, all the way up to Cleveland Clinic, right? Everybody thought I had stage 4 lung cancer.
Wow.
Maybe a year or two to live kind of thing. And actually had a lobectomy, had the top third of my left lung taken out, and turned out to be a fungus, not cancer, which was great. Obviously, hate to have a piece of your lung taken out, but it wasn't cancer. So yeah, right. Anyway, but for about 6-8 weeks between the time I was first diagnosed and the time I went in, obviously I had a lot of time to think about things, and pretty early, the day I got like what I would call the serious diagnosis with a nuclear PET scan, and they said, yeah, that's what that is, and I remember kind of running through my head this bucket list, right? And sort of the first thing you kind of think of, right? This is this bucket list. And I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. I probably thought about it for I don't know, 20 minutes, right? Well, first I cried for about an hour, right?
Well, yeah.
The shock of like, holy crap, I'm checking out, man. And, and on the bucket list, those things that you would absolutely want to do, like walk your daughter down the aisle, right?
Yeah.
See your grandkids. Any of those kinds of things that would be, but those aren't in the cards when you think you have stage 4 lung cancer, like, okay, yeah, whatever. So now it's what I would call the more trivial bucket list things, right? Whatever. Where haven't you gone? What haven't you done? And I thought about it for probably 20 minutes, Carter. And the only thing I could come up with was I'd tried to see lava several times. Like I'd gone to Hawaii and Kilauea wasn't erupting. I went to Costa Rica a couple of times and Arenal was socked in, and so lava, like I'd always wanted to see lava and hadn't seen it. So I figured I can get that done. Right. And, but the reality is that was it, Carter. I really,
Wow.
I really didn't have anything on my bucket list, no regrets, so to speak. Right. But if I get a little glib and I go back to my 17-year-old self, what advice would I give myself? Ready, Carter? You're going to love this one. Pay attention in typing class. In high school, I took typing class, and like I'm thinking to myself, I'm never going to need to know how to type ever, right? Ever. Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, no way. Not in my cards, right? And obviously, I do a ton of typing now. It's all 2 finger and 2 thumbs. But anyway, It's miserable. But anyway, that would be the one advice I would love to give my 17-year-old self at this point. Pay
You know,
attention and type in class.
what's so funny? Now we want to get to offshore investment advice, but just general advice to your 17-year-old self. It's
Yes.
so funny. When I was thinking about asking you this, I thought my advice would be, Carter, stop chasing after Janie Owens and pay attention to playing baseball.
There
I'm
you
serious.
go.
I was
All right.
scouted by the pros, everything. I totally lost interest. It was so my advice would be exactly that. Pick up the baseball bat and play that game.
And you never married Janie Owens, did you?
I never did.
Yeah, see.
I never did. We're still friends though.
Oh, are you?
60 years later, whatever.
Oh, how funny.
60 years later.
Yeah.
So but what would you say?
What would I tell my 18-year-old self about offshore investing? Okay.
I did take typing, and thank God I did focus.
Okay.
Seriously.
All right.
I'm a writer, so you can imagine. But about offshore investment, we're talking 30 years ago, a little over 30, as you've said. And we're
talking 40, Carter. That's like 25% more. But anyway.
I just never was good at math.
Yeah.
So you're talking to him about the investing offshore 40 years ago. What would you say to him? Because you have invested offshore in ways that most people could not even imagine, and you have been remarkably successful. I think you are. I always say you're the offshore Oracle, and it's true. I mean, there's nobody else out there who has done what you've done offshore, and that's why, folks, this is such a great podcast. But what would you say 40 years ago to that kid if you knew then what you know now?
Yeah, so that would have been 1988, right? I was 18 in 88. So I would probably well, that doesn't sound right. 82. Yeah, 82. 82. Sorry, it was 82.
82.
Right, 82.
Yeah. Look at me nodding, saying, yeah, it sounds good to me.
Yeah, you admitted you weren't good at math a minute ago. So yeah, right. Me either, apparently. So 1982. I think a couple things. One, I would say go to Belize, young man. I mean, Belize had just become Belize from British Honduras the year before, 1981.
That's right.
I would say go to Belize and buy beachfront property for nothing, right? For absolutely nothing at that point. I got there about 13, 14 years later in 1994 and bought my first condo there in early 95. But anyway, or I guess I bought my condo in, somewhere in 94, 95. I don't remember. Anyway, but the point is that, 12 years later, I bought something there and it was still very, very inexpensive. But I think I would have said, go to Belize, because then it would have been just, another, 5-banger on top of, whatever we've made so far there. So I think Belize would be one. Probably get myself to Costa Rica, a little further down the development pipeline, maybe do something in Costa Rica in the early 80s. That probably would have been a good, investment as well. But, I think those would be the things. And it's interesting because, there's always, the 18-year-old Mike, so to speak. There's always the 1982 somewhere. One of the concepts I write about a lot and speak about a lot is the time machine. And what I say is that the developing world is like a time machine, and you can actually climb in it and turn the dial back. How far do you want to go back? You want to go back 10 years, 20 years, 30 years compared to the US, say, for example. And the further back you go, the less expensive it is, right? And the less developed it is, right? So you're kind of putting yourself on this continuum, right? How far back in time do I want to go on a development curve, popularity curve, path of progress kind of investment opportunity? And I always ask this question at conferences. I put up this picture of H.G. Wells's Time Machine, and who knows? I mean, it's the cover of a book, right?
Sure.
And I say, look, if H.G. Wells popped into this room right now, right, and boom, there he is, and he said, all right, everybody, get on the time machine with me, bring one check, and we're going to go back 30 years. everybody can have the whole rest of today to make one investment with that check. And then everybody climb back on. I'll bring you right back here, and boom, you'll be back here exactly the same moment.
Beautiful.
You know, how many of you would come back a lot wealthier? Right. And like, you know, people are a little shy. I'm like, really? I'm like, I'll put my hand up. I'm coming back really wealthy, right? One check, one investment 30 years ago. Everybody, you know, hindsight's 2020, right? And so this idea of time machine, Carter, yes, Belize in 1982 was way off the, you know, way off the scales. Nobody was looking at it, right?
Yeah.
Except my friend, except my longtime friend Ron Zent, who bought miles and miles of beachfront property, the British American Cattle Company. Ron was quite a character when I met him in 94, 95. And started running around the country with him. But he had bought miles and miles and miles of beach in the early 80s, right, for cattle production. And then the cattle markets tanked in Texas and around the world. And so he became a developer, right? But so, you know, but there were a few people buying it, like Ron and others. But my point is, there's always a 1982 Belize out there. There is.
That's what I love. That's
right?
I'm glad you said that, because I want to bring that point home to people. Folks, we're just not doing a trip down memory lane. Some of you watching this show now, our average viewer is around 55 to 60, okay, about your age. But we also have a lot of young people watch the show. I know, because I get their emails. And the reason we're doing this is those young people have to say, if I invested today, if I took Mike Cobb's advice today, your time machine, where would I be in 30 to 40 years? Where would that money be?
Sure.
I mean, it's still an incredible opportunity. The prices in, for instance, Belize prices have gone up a little, like Costa Rica.
Right.
But Guatemala, Honduras, Ecuador, these countries, the prices are still absolutely just bargain basement.
Hey, Carter, I'm going to disappear from the screen for a second. I want to grab something. I'll be right back. And keep talking, because you're saying what people need to hear. People need to hear this.
We're bringing it home. We're bringing it home, folks. Well, you know, Mike builds cozy homes, and 700, 800 square feet that you can get for, I think, $149,000 to $169,000. Incredible bargain. All right. For those who are young, especially, invest in them now, because they're just going to keep going up. And so what we're talking about, I want you to take in your mind and say, get in that time machine and think where your investment's going to, what it's going to bring you, the ROI in 30 to 40 years. Yes, I love that chart. I was looking for it and I couldn't find it this morning.
I knew where to find it. I just had to go grab my global property resource kit, right? Which is the more fully spelled out version of the Consumer Resource Guide, which is a great
now how tell them how
people.
They can get that, because that Mike Cobb investment chart, folks, that is money in the bank. It tells you where to invest right now, from the Abyssinian markets all the way to the mature markets. Where can they get the guide?
info@ecidevelopment.com. Just write Global Property Resource Kit. Just write investment guide or something, whatever. We'll make sure they get that.
Good. All right.
And so, Carter, I mean, you're to use this example, where is Belize 1982? And they're probably trying to think. Suriname. I mean, I've never even been to Suriname, right? But I'm just pulling something out of my butt here. That's like, you're like, where? Suriname. You know why I say that? No, you know why I say that? Because nobody's going to Suriname except the oil executives. That's the only people going to Suriname right now.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
Oil executives.
Let me grab something here while you're talking.
But actually, now that I say that, I probably need to get my ass to Suriname and check it out and buy a mile of beach for I don't know, $250,000 or something. So actually, I just made a note.
Folks, Mike, I gotta interrupt you. Folks, Suriname actually is a country in Central America, right? Or
South America. It's right. It's right on the top of South America there.
I was looking for my map that I always keep around. There we go. Look, this, I have to laugh because, Mike, you're talking about a country. Look, folks, see it right there. It is minuscule. most people say, "What do you say?" Well, there
Yeah.
you go, folks. Now you know. Yeah, but
Yeah.
Suriname, I think you can still get. Well, I know because I've on Coffee with Carib Carter every Monday at noon at Offshore Club, folks. I I have actually talked about property in Suriname.
Oh, have you
Yeah.
really?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think actually I just made a mental note. I will be checking out Suriname because that probably is Belize in 1982 or something like that.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Belize in 1990 or even 2000. Let me even just move it forward. Belize 2000 was still an incredible real estate market, and so a 20-year like on the curve, like Belize 20 years ago. Let me just say that Belize 20 years ago right now is Nicaragua, which is why I love Nicaragua. Everyone,
Yeah.
it's such a, I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a dist country because of its long history. The Civil War in the 80s, but my goodness, I mean, that's 40 years ago, right? So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
Nicaragua is Belize 20 years ago right now. And so if somebody's saying, well, how do I make a really long-term investment in a country that's not very popular, but that's getting more popular and it's on the development curve, the growth curve, all that kind of stuff. Nicaragua, it's really easy. And even something, and for the younger folks, I mean, that you mentioned people in their 30s and 40s, owning a teak parcel in Nicaragua for $8,000. I'm making up numbers. I'm close on that. About
Incredible.
$8,000. Like you can get a teak parcel in Nicaragua. So now you have this, a timber investment in a developing country. And I'll give you one example. So I started my first teak plantation in Panama in 1999. I bought a 100-acre farm near the end of the Pan American Highway, where literally it ends in the jungles of Panama in the Darien province. And it was a dirt, bumpy, horrible road. 60 miles took 4 hours, and it was miserable to get there, right? And they were like, "Oh yeah, the road's going to get paved." And I'm like, "Yeah, right." And whatever. I'm sure it will. Anyway, well, here we are in 2022, 23 years later, the road is paved, and the value of the real estate has gone up 5 times. Let alone the teak trees that we planted, which are now 23 years old, and and they're this big around, and whatever, 60
Right.
feet tall, 80
Right.
feet tall. I don't know how tall, big. They're big old teak trees. We're going to come down in 3-4 years, right? So, but forget the value of the timber. The land has gone up 5-fold in price from what we paid for it. And so like that's why doing something in a country like Nicaragua is so incredibly forward thinking,
Oh,
especially
it's
for younger people, right? And look, if you're 18 or 19 years old and you've got 10 grand, I mean, that's just, I mean, my goodness, you put that in there when you're 25, 10, whatever, 20, 45 years old, right? You're going to get a nice return, and you're going to have some property that's going to be worth more than you paid for it, probably. And we can't predict the future. But anyway, yeah, man, there are just
plus
so many
plus
ways
with
to take that time machine back in time and take advantage of this path of progress, right?
plus you said the land has gone up 5 times,
Yeah.
and the teak itself, I think, will give like a 10-time could
Yeah.
well
Yeah.
give a 10-time return on value.
Yeah. More or less. That's correct. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
correct.
So it's it's a tremendous investment for folks.
Right.
Again, folks, I'm glad you used the image of the time machine. Folks, put yourself in that time machine. Here, what I always tell people, and with young people, it's hard for them to believe. But, I got to be honest with you, Mike. In the blink of an eye, I am back 15 years old playing shortstop at Roosevelt Park in Baltimore. It's that
Chasing
fast,
Joni around.
folks. What'd you say?
What's her name? Joni?
It's chasing Janie around. Well,
Or
that's when I
Janie,
stopped playing.
chasing Janie
Unfortunately,
around. Yeah.
I left shortstop. But it passes that quick.
Yeah.
So don't think to yourself, oh man, 30 years. It's not a long time.
No. And
And
and it's going to come, Carter. Like I mean, unless you die, of course, right? But any and all of these assets, you should put them in your will so they pass on to the next generation if you happen to die. But look, 25 years for most of us is going to happen, right? If we're in
blink of
our
an eye.
blink of an
Blink
eye,
of an
and
eye.
and
Yeah.
and I remember I was in the Rotary Club right across the street here in Shepherdstown when I was down in Panama. I don't know, I was probably down there 10, 12 times over the space of not even a year, looking at property, meeting forestry management companies, interviewing them, going and visiting nurseries. And I mean, just on and on and on. I made a lot of trips to Panama in 98 and 99 to get this plantation started. And I remember the guys across the street, it was a Rotary meeting. So you show up, at 7:00, there's breakfast till 7:30. And
right.
you sit around a table with 8, 10, folks. And they just were kind of picking on me. You got to be kidding me, Cobb. Panama, 25 years. Are you out of your gourd? What are you thinking? And the answer I came up with after a couple breakfasts of being harassed by these guys and ladies was, look, in 25 years, I'm either going to need the money and I'm going to be really glad I did this. Or in 25 years, I'm not going to need the money and I'm going to be really glad I did this,
Yeah.
And you know what, Carter, 23 years into this thing, I got to say, I'm really glad I did this. And you're right. Bam, blink of an eye, man. 25, 23, 24 years has just flown by. So I'm a big fan of making long-term investments that don't pay off right away, right? That they hang out there, but they build incredible value because they don't cash flow on any short-term basis. By the way, a lot of times people get hung up on this notion of cash flow. Oh, a 25-year investment. I can't lock my cash up that long. I'm sorry, $8,000. Like if you can't lock $8,000 up for 25 years, I'm assuming you have the $8,000 to invest. Let's make that assumption, right? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, right? But if you have $8,000 to invest and you think to yourself, oh, I can't lock it up for 25 years, well then shame on you, because you know what? 25-year cash flow is cash flow. You get a paycheck every 2 weeks. A lot of people like rental properties. You get a rent check every month, right? Some people like dividend paying stocks. They get a dividend every quarter or every year. Like they think that's cash flow, and it is cash flow. But 25-year cycle cash flow is cash flow.
It's cash flow.
It's
Excellent.
cash flow. It's just on a 25-year cycle.
Yeah.
And so like this idea, oh, it's too long, I'm locking up my money for 25 years. Absolutely you are, right? But guess what? That you start to get the returns that you get, and then you get what I like to just even think about is generational wealth stewardship, right? Now all of a sudden in 25 years you take a harvest, you replant and you title that property, that teak plantation. It is titled, you own the land, it's yours, right?
It's yours.
And you title it, you take it and transfer the title to your children or a trust or a charity. A lot of people are putting it in charitable remainder trusts, right? Because then it goes on every 25 years to produce a great return, but a great gift to those charities, for hundreds of years. And by the way, if you look at schools like Harvard, Yale, I mean, these big endowment funds have tons of timber. Up to 10% of the endowment of Harvard at one point was in timber. Why? Because it's long-term cash flow. They don't need the money this year. I mean, they do, but they need money 20 years from now and 25 years from now, right? And so they put this stuff in as long-term cash flow, generational wealth stewardship or endowment stewardship. And so for people thinking about investments and investment strategies, I firmly believe that some part of our wealth needs to be in long-term cash flow and generational wealth stewardship. Or if our children are set or whatever, then, endow a charity or endow an organization or an institution with that, because then they get that 25-year cash flow cycle, kind of like forever. I mean, forever is a long time, but, Harvard's been around for what, 300 years, right? It's right.
Well, it's just great advice. And I think back, and we're almost out of time here, but I think back when I was a kid, my dad was a minister in Hollywood, Maryland, way down in southern Maryland. Mm-hmm. And Solomon's Island was there. And I remember one of his members saying, Reverend, you ought to go over Solomon's Island. You can buy that land over there for $10 an acre. Okay? $10 an acre. My dad was a Methodist minister back in the days, and he didn't have $10. Okay? Yeah. He had been as that, then we wouldn't have had shoes. But so he couldn't do it. Today on Solomon's Island, it's $350,000 an acre. That's cash flow.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right. It's equity and cash flow. So, and to the young people, I would say, don't buy the fancy car, buy a junker and take the money and put it, because that fancy car ain't even going to be around in 25 years, but that land's still going to be, just like Mike Cobb says. Mike, that's great.
Great. Well, Carter,
That's great.
thank you.
That's
Yeah.
great
Always
advice.
good to be with you, man.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you. Now we know the advice you would give. As a matter of fact, and don't forget, folks, Mike took his own advice. He is a major, the major investor offshore, 5, 6 Caribbean residential resorts, all of them beautiful. Check them out, Grand Pacifica, every one of them. Go to ecidevelopment.com website, and you can look at all of them. And take that advice. Take that advice. Get in that time machine. And when you get back out 25 years from now, you're going to say, thank God I took that ride. Folks, thanks for joining us. Let's do this thing.